Hi, thank you very much for joining. I'm joined by Ryan, who is from Bishopsgate. I'm going to be taking you through the umbrella regulations and how to safeguard your agency. To give you a little bit of background on FCSA, we are the leading, we're known as the leading experts in compliance and the accepted gold standard for the accreditation in this industry, and we are the only not-for-profit in the sector. FCSA assessments are carried out by best in class, so the independent assessors, and we use the likes of Ernst & Young, JMW Solicitors, Brabner's, Safri and BDO. So nobody marks their own homework, and they are the employment law and employment tax experts in their field. Bishopsgate themselves are FCSA accredited for the umbrella service and the CIS service, and they are also live on Diligence Hub, and I'll come back to that in a little moment. So a little bit on how we got to where we are now. Back in 2022, there was a call for evidence, and that was regulating the umbrella market. Now, that was put together by the Department of Business and Trade, BEIS as it was known at the time. And we roll on 2 years because nothing happens very fast. We had the consultation, however, this time it was conducted under HMT, so His Majesty's Treasury, as it is now. At that point, we knew it was going to be all about the money. Because when Treasury involved, process, policy are the focus, it very, very much becomes money driven. So in October of last year, we moved to where the Chancellor said that it was going to be option 3 as the preferred choice. And option 3, for those who, just for a recap, is the deemed employer option. And that option meant that the recruitment agency, the employment business, would become responsible for the employment tax. And the only way to have done that would have been to move the employee reference number. So at that time, that was a massive, potentially would have been a huge shake-up for the industry. So many unintended consequences. So we brought together, the FCSA brought together the industry working group, the IWG, and we brought in providers from different areas. So IPSI to cover the contractor voice, REC APSCO team to cover the agency voice, and there were software providers in there as well. We also at the time engaged Rebecca Seeley-Harris to look into alternatives to option 3. Because what we didn't want to do is just go to the government with here's a list of problems. We wanted to go, here is a list of problems and here is a list of solutions. So that's what we did in early 2025. We created a report. It's about 70 pages long, and it gave all the problems on option 3 and how it wouldn't have worked, not only for the umbrella or the agency, but also for the worker and for the end clients and for government themselves at HMRC. So we had dozens and dozens of meetings with MPs, peers. We worked with FCSA members themselves, and spent a lot of time lobbying to move the position. Rebecca, with our support, proposed joint and several liability as a solution. It's already a solution that's known to HMRC and HMT, so it's not a new idea. It's something that's already out there, but what we gave was a way it could work in this sector. So on the 21st of July, so last Monday, the government gave the draft finance bill. We were hoping and waiting for it from 8 o'clock in the morning, and it landed at 5:15 that night. So it was a rather long evening going through the detail. So joint and several liability, JSL, is now the government's policy. That's what's been proposed and that's what's in the draft. And we do see it as a big win, not only for Rebecca and ourselves, but for the industry as a whole, because what could have been in would have been so much worse. So if we look now to the actual regulations as they're coming in, there's going to be a new Chapter 11 of ITPA, and that's going to become effective from the 6th of April next year. Joint and several liability, so JSL, It basically means it's going to be for relevant parties in the supply chain, which covers agencies and end clients, and they will share liability for PAYE payments when the payment hasn't gone through like it should have done. It's going to apply to the whole amount due and includes any shortfalls and underpayments, regardless of the reason for it. There's going to be no statutory excuse, and the legislation will automatically apply and smoke screens will be ignored. Offshoring entities in the supply chain will also be ignored. And that is a good thing. So it means that there's going to be no false constructs, there's going to be no way to manipulate it. The way it's been drafted will be very clear to follow a line of who's going to hold the liability. They're using a rather broad definition of umbrella companies to include employment businesses and intermediaries directly engaging the worker under a contract of service, so a contract of employment. But I think that the crucial part in all of this is recruiters are not being deemed as the employer. That's not going to be the thing anymore. The umbrella, so in this case, Bishopsgate, will remain primarily responsible for PAYE. It will be the Bishopsgate employee reference number, so PAYE reference number of Bishopsgate, that will still be used. And the liability and responsibility for employment law, employment rights, employment tax is still going to be Bishopsgate, still going to be the umbrellas. So that kind of means it's business as usual. Nothing really changes. There's no change in employment contracts. There's no changes in the kids. Just that continuous reminder of please do make sure that you get them right. And as a slight note on that one, we do really recommend that you use the term assignment rate on kids rather than any other term. It does make it clear that the assignment rate is not the PAYE rate. And we do see that getting confused quite a bit. So they've brought in relevant party. So what does that mean? Relevant party, when they're discussing this, seems to mean it's going to be the topmost agency in the chain. So that's the one with the contract with the end client. Even if there are multiple agencies involved, it's going to be the one at the top that has the liability. Where there's no agency involved, the end client becomes liable. If there's an MSP or an agency which is connected to the umbrella, the rules seem to ignore that connection, the end client becomes liable. And connected in this world means common ownership or common directorship. And if the topmost agency isn't UK based, like I mentioned before, offshore entities are being ignored, the end client may still be liable. And we have taken legal advice on this next piece, which is regarding MSPs. So MSPs are going to be included in these regulations, even if they are not in the payment chain. So if they are in the supply chain, not in the payment chain, they are still going to be bound under these rules. And we've seen a new phrase this time round, which is purported umbrella, and that is even broader. And it's been done broader in one sense. Back in 22, there's quite a narrow definition of umbrella. And we were definitely one of the loud voices warning against a very narrow definition, because as soon as you make something very prescribed, somebody will change one thing and therefore they're straight outside the regulation because the rules don't apply to them. So they've gone wide. They've gone wider, I think, than any of us thought they would have done. So it's purported. So it's what they think is. So if they believe you to be, that is what it's going to be, which means it will catch many umbrella companies. It will stop fraudulent arrangements which utilise compliance loopholes, and it will stop the unlawful gross pay models, so things like false self-employment. So what we kind of an analogy for it is, if it looks like a duck, walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, it's going to be a duck. They are changing quite a bit of other legislation to make sure that they can, impose these new rules. So the Social Security Contributions and Benefits Act of 92 will have some amends made to allow for a JSL for NIC purposes. The fraudulent documents condition is going to be updated, and that basically means that where a non-compliant umbrella is doctoring and creating false payslips as evidence to the agency that everything's fine and they've paid everything and everything's as it should be, the agency won't be able to use those as evidence to give them an excuse. So fraudulent documents will no longer, they can't be used as evidence. HMRC will be able to issue Regulation 80, a determination, which means it's an automatic process to enforce the legislation, so that they don't have to go through the loopholes that they previously, not loopholes, the hurdles that they've previously had to. And quite an interesting one here is the genuinely self-employed and those deemed to be employees for tax purposes under Chapters 7 through 10 of ITPA are going to be excluded from new Chapter 11 because the existing chapters will take precedence. So agency worker rules under Chapter 7, etc. will take precedence over anything new in Chapter 11. So a couple of diagrams just to help explain who is liable. So in a normal vanilla chain, we've got a non-compliant umbrella there. It's going to be the agency that would ultimately bear liability should the non-compliant operator not do what they meant to be doing. Like I think the clue's in the title of non-compliant operator. In a complex supply chain, and I appreciate these images aren't overly complex, but hopefully you get the gist. Wait, so you've got somebody else in that chain other than that top agency closest to the end client. It's going to be the top agency or the top MSP, the one that holds the contract with the end client, that will become liable. And in a direct engagement model, it's the end client that holds liability. In a situation where there is a connected agency to the umbrella, it would be the end client that becomes responsible. And if there's an offshore intermediary in that supply chain, that is ignored and it becomes the agency in the chain, or ultimately the end client if there isn't an agency in the middle. So how do you de-risk this situation? Firstly, you're off to a great, I really can't speak. You are off to a great start. You're working with Bishopsgate, which is great. They are an FCSA accredited member. So definitely, your foundations are in the right place. We would suggest further you look at your PSL, and we would suggest that you move to an assured provider list of only FCSA accredited members. And if you're not all ready to become an FCSA recruiter partner, so you get insights and mitigation tools directly from us. We can share more information about that separately, and I'm sure Bishopsgate and Ryan can share information should you want any as well. We strongly suggest you work with your provider to ensure that there is strong trust between the two of you, and that helps mitigate risk in itself. Things like keeping ahead of the curve with FCSA's Diligence Hub, Bishopsgate, I said earlier, are already on that. Diligence Hub is a compliance pack. It's an online compliance pack. Members are asked to update that information every 3 months. So it keeps it fresh. They can do it more often should they want. You can request that they do it more often, and you get notified if there are any changes. But it will cover things like AWR, holiday pay, the sample pay slips, there's proof of payments, proof of remittances across to HMRC, etc. So all the evidence you need is in that portal. You can verify payroll accuracy and HMRC remittances directly with VeriPay. That's a payslip checking software that FCSA offer, and both are really low-cost services which do the heavy lifting. Due diligence in all of this is going to be key, and that you only hold relationships with companies that you trust, and being proactive in your due diligence, documenting it properly, asking questions, asking for evidence is going to be essential. And we certainly will be helping our recruiter partners build on their existing processes. And we'd say don't fall for unrealistic incentives. They're not affordable by compliant umbrellas. Long gone are the days of holidays and kitchens, and quite rightly, in a compliant supply chain, there isn't margin there for big incentives in any which way. We also say don't fall for outside the regulation schemes, and yes, we have already seen one. The draft bill came out on Monday, and by Thursday we'd already seen talk of try this method, you're not going to get caught, don't worry agency. this will fall outside of the rules. It's going to be fine. The lawyers looked at that situation and went, nope, that's a purported umbrella. It will be caught. So it is designed to catch them. And I think that's the message everybody needs to be really mindful of, that people will try and pull fast ones. You just really need to be alert to it. It does mean, though, that payroll pirates are going to be easier to spot, both by ourselves as FCSA, and we do report them wherever we can, and by HMRC themselves. That is going to be moving into what will be the Fair Work Agency in 2027. Currently, it's going to sit under EASY, so EASI, until the Fair Work Agency is fully formed. So we've just put together some questions on the frequently asked questions we've already had. Will MSPs be on the hook? Yes, even if they're not in a payment chain. When will this hit Parliament? Finance bills usually October, November, but we are already lobbying to make sure some of the detail isn't currently in the draft bill. We are asking for some further clarification on certain areas. The liability for VAT. Now, that VAT is already covered. There's already case law out under Kittle and ICL. JSL already applies under a VAT notice. So HMRC already pursue these cases. It's not a loophole. They're already fully aware of how to catch that. We've also had it since confirmed regarding apprenticeship levy that is going to be covered by the Social Security Contributions and Benefits Act, so that will also come under JSL. And agencies who've already had queries regarding flat rate VAT schemes, querying if they are legitimate, and our response to that would be rarely. And we do suggest that you use the barge pole rule to avoid. And yeah, just as a recap, I think it is quite clear the government seem to have established a self-policing tax regime, and the idea behind that is where in the past some recruitment agencies would willingly work with non-compliant operators because of the rebates and the funds. Right now, they used to say they can't afford not to work with them. Now it'd be they can't afford to work with them. So we will see that the industry naturally move away from non-compliant operators. We've been asked if we would expect any behaviour changes as well, and yes, I think we will. We're already seeing, and this is kind of ramped up probably in the last month, more so in the last week or so, where end clients, MSPs, the lead agency are requiring the use of FCSA accredited providers. That message is coming through from the top down, and they want, at least it's known, you've got an extra person, an extra company checking, rather than them being allowed to use an unknown entity without that trust there. We expect a huge uplift in due diligence, both proactive and robust. Making sure it's not just a box ticking exercise, that you're understanding the due diligence that you're conducting, you're reading your responses and you're double checking them, and using third-party tools like VeriPay, Diligence Hub, etc. to try and help strengthen. So they're not a replacement to due diligence, but they're an extra thing you can do to help strengthen your existing processes. We're also expecting end clients who are direct to umbrella to potentially start using agencies to put an extra level in that chain, because without that agency in, the end client is the one who is potentially liable should something go wrong. And equally, where an agency is directly engaging through agency worker, that potentially they will be requiring them to move them to umbrellas. So again, you've got that extra level in the chain. And I think that we've already seen this one again, which links very much to that first point of where end clients and MSPs are requiring due diligence. So they're wanting evidence from the agency of the due diligence that they've conducted, because they're knowing that risk is moving. And again, we've already seen this one as well, where indemnities potentially are going to be required. And there's already quite a lot of talk in the industry on indemnities. FCSA are certainly looking at that in depth. And I think obviously we will cascade as and when we know more. So I think the last part would be, what's FCSA's opinion on the draft regulation? Are we happy with it? And happy? Nah. Do we welcome it? Yes, it is better than what it could have been. And I think that's where we need to keep going back to. The original option 3, the deemed employer, would have been a huge headache for everybody, the entire industry and government. So not only for the government to be able to police it, but the agencies and the umbrellas, a huge repapering exercise, but also the workers themselves as well. The amount of rights that they potentially would lose, continuity of employment, so many changes for them. So we are very happy that hasn't happened. And equally so, we're happy that it's going to close down the payroll pirates and help close the tax gap. And ultimately, and I think this is the one where everybody is happy about, is that everybody should be able to compete on a level playing field. I think that's the most welcome of it all. So that is everything from me. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Deb. Yeah, just to add on to that, I mean, Bishopsgate are obviously here to support, and as Deb's already highlighted, if you're not already doing so, you need to be looking at carrying out due diligence on your supply chain. If they're not FCSA accredited, they should be. That's probably the #1 priority that should be taken away from this. But if you want any support on carrying out due diligence on other suppliers, just reach out and we'll happily help. But yeah, thanks a lot, Deb. It's really informative. It is kind of business as usual for us and for our clients because we are doing things properly. But yeah, rest assured we'll keep updating everyone as we go. But yeah, thank you very much for all of your time, and thanks again, Deb.
Thanks.